Certainly. Below is a complete story titled, "She begged her tyrant father to let her marry the man who took arrows to save her," in approximately 1600 words. The story is set in a fictional medieval kingdom and follows themes of love, sacrifice, and defiance against tyranny. She begged her tyrant father to let her marry the man who took arrows to save her. In the heart of the kingdom of Eldoria, where the mountains kissed the sky and the rivers sang ancient songs, there lived a princess named Elara. She was the only daughter of King Vortigern, a ruler feared for his iron fist and merciless decisions. The king's tyranny cast a shadow over the land, but Elara was a beacon of light. Her kindness and grace were whispered about in every village, and her beauty was said to rival the stars themselves. Elara's life was one of gilded cages. Though she lived in a palace of marble and gold, her father's oppressive rule suffocated her spirit. She longed for freedom, for a life beyond the cold walls of the castle. But her father had other plans. He saw her as a pawn, a means to secure alliances through a strategic marriage. Elara dreaded the day she would be forced to wed a man she did not love. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Elara ventured beyond the castle walls. Disguised as a commoner, she wandered into the bustling marketplace of Eldoria's capital. It was there, amidst the laughter of children and the chatter of merchants, that she first laid eyes on him. His name was Kael, a humble blacksmith with hands calloused from years of forging steel. But Kael was no ordinary man. He was a former soldier, a warrior who had once fought for the kingdom before disillusionment led him to lay down his sword. His eyes, a piercing shade of green, held stories of battles fought and lives lost. Yet, there was a gentleness in them that drew Elara in. Their meeting was brief but unforgettable. Kael noticed the princess's disguise but chose not to reveal her secret. Instead, he offered her a small, handcrafted pendant, a silver rose, delicate yet enduring. Elara felt something stir within her, a feeling she had never known before. Weeks turned into months, and Elara found herself sneaking out of the castle more often, drawn to Kael's forge. They spoke of dreams and desires, of a world beyond the confines of duty and power. Kael's words were like a balm to her weary soul, and Elara's laughter became his greatest treasure. Unbeknownst to them, their love was a flame that would soon be tested by the winds of fate. One evening, as Elara made her way back to the castle, she was ambushed by a group of bandits. They had recognized her despite her disguise and saw an opportunity to ransom the king's daughter. Elara fought valiantly, but she was outnumbered. Just as hope began to fade, Kael appeared, his sword gleaming in the moonlight. The battle was fierce. Kael fought with the skill of a seasoned warrior, but the bandits were relentless. In the chaos, one of them drew a bow and aimed an arrow at Elara. Without hesitation, Kael threw himself in front of her, taking the arrow in his shoulder. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall, and with a final surge of strength, he defeated the remaining assailants. Elara cradled Kael in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Kael smiled weakly, his hand brushing her cheek. "Because you are worth every arrow, every scar, every breath I have." The guards arrived soon after, alerted by the commotion. They carried Kael to the castle, where the royal physicians tended to his wounds. Elara refused to leave his side, her heart aching with guilt and gratitude. But her father, King Vortigern, saw the situation differently. When the king learned of Kael's heroism, he was not moved by the blacksmith's bravery. Instead, he saw a commoner who had dared to lay hands on his daughter. Vortigern ordered Kael to be thrown into the dungeons, accusing him of conspiring with the bandits to gain favor with the princess. Elara was devastated. She pleaded with her father, begging him to see the truth. "Kael saved my life. He took an arrow for me. How can you punish him for his courage?" But the king was unmoved. "A blacksmith is no fit company for a princess," he sneered. "You will marry Duke Malric, as I have arranged. This fool will rot in the dungeons for his insolence." Elara's heart shattered. She could not bear the thought of losing Kael, nor could she accept a future with the cruel and arrogant Duke Malric. Desperation fueled her resolve, and she made a decision that would change the course of her life. That night, under the cover of darkness, Elara stole the keys to the dungeons from her father's chambers. She crept through the cold, damp corridors, her heart pounding with fear and determination. When she reached Kael's cell, she found him weak but alive. "Elara," he whispered, his eyes widening in surprise. "You shouldn't be here." "I couldn't leave you," she replied, unlocking the cell. "We have to go. Now." Together they fled the castle, their escape aided by the loyalty of a few servants who had grown to love the princess. They sought refuge in the forest where Kael's friends, former soldiers and outcasts, welcomed them with open arms. But their freedom was short-lived. King Vortigern, enraged by his daughter's defiance, sent his soldiers to hunt them down. The kingdom was thrown into chaos as whispers of rebellion began to spread. The people, long oppressed by the king's tyranny, saw in Elara and Kael a symbol of hope. The final confrontation came at the edge of the Blackwood forest. Kael, though still recovering from his wounds, stood ready to fight. Elara, armed with a bow and a heart full of resolve, stood by his side. The king's soldiers surrounded them, but before the battle could begin, Elara stepped forward. "Father," she called out, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "I beg you, stop this madness. Kael is not your enemy. He is the man I love, the man who risked his life to save me. Is that not worth more than your pride?" For a moment the king hesitated. He saw the determination in his daughter's eyes, the same fire that had once burned within him before power had hardened his heart. But then his gaze fell on Kael, and his anger flared anew. "You will obey me, Elara," he growled, "or you will share his fate." Before the king could give the order to attack, a voice rang out from the crowd. It was one of the soldiers, a young man who had once served under Kael. "Your Majesty," he said, stepping forward. "The princess speaks the truth. Kael is a hero, and we are tired of fighting for a king who cares only for himself." One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons, their loyalty shifting from the king to the princess and the man who had earned their respect. King Vortigern, realizing he had lost, fell to his knees, defeated not by force but by the courage of those he had tried to control. In the days that followed, Elara and Kael returned to the castle, not as fugitives but as leaders. The people of Eldoria hailed them as saviors, and Elara was crowned queen. Kael, though he had no desire for power, stood by her side as her husband and consort. Together they ruled with compassion and wisdom, healing the wounds of a broken kingdom. And though their journey had been fraught with danger and sacrifice, they knew that their love had been worth every arrow, every scar, every breath.